Hey guys, welcome to Bar Z. My name's Stan, and welcome to another episode of The Grind. This is grind number 36. I'd like to start this month's show by talking about a new piece of equipment that's coming up here for me in the near future. Let's go take a quick look at that. So, if this is a disease, I don't want to find no cure. Yes, I bought another grinder. It's kind of a long road trip, so I'm looking for another reason to go up in the area and go pick this thing up. That is a 6x18 Challenger Deluxe. Boyer Schultz. This is an auto step. Challenger model is the 18-inch throw. With that opens up a few capabilities. It's got a little bit taller spindle, which upcoming later in this episode we're going to wish we had. And then it also has the auto step, which that's going to really help out things here with the left arm. So upcoming soon, a new surface grinder. Next up is I want everyone to kind of look around what you're seeing here and maybe pay attention to what's up there. Look for an announcement February late on an upcoming event. Next up, I'd like to thank everyone for responding to my last grind. I had a lot of good responses and a lot of good comments, and a lot of diesel mechanics chimed in about my new truck. Now, I've towed for the first time, as seen here. Now, that's a 10,000 pound trailer, fully laden on the pin. I clocked 14 miles to the gallon towing that trailer, which is impressive. Really enjoyed towing that. Comfortable, the long wheelbase of the truck, tows straight and nice going down the road. So pretty happy with the new truck. And thanks again to everyone that chimed in about the oil and why it was black, and a lot of diesel mechanics and stuff and technicians made some really good comments. I love my viewers. Thank you very much. Next up, the old What's in Your Box vise that I ground. Randy Richard made some collector's coins, as seen here. I'd like to thank Randy Richard for making those, and those have been forwarded to Brad Jacob. He was kind of the spearhead and the central location for that entire project, and those are getting distributed to everyone that laid a finger on that vise. So even Tom Lipton and Keith Rucker made the box, and those coins are just going out in all different directions. So thank you, Randy and Brad. We look forward to seeing those coins getting distributed. Next up, on my last video, we talked about a self-driving center that I used on the lathe, and I got a lot of people that said, hey, can you give us some dimensions on that, some angles and some dimensions. They thought it was pretty cool. Let's look at a photograph. Now those are, I put a ruler down there with it. I just put the center in a V block on my plate, and that's a 30-degree angle to give you a reference on the cut, and that's a 60-degree angle to give you a reference on the pin. And all that is a shoulder bolt with a sleeve as a driving pin. That is a 3/8 shoulder bolt, or 3/8 thread. I don't know what size the shoulder comes out to. But if you need to, go back and look at that picture again if you want to make yourself one. That's just a chunk of 1018 junk steel, and I have to reface it all the time because it's always getting dinged and bent and everything like that. One of these days I am going to make myself a hardened one. All right, next up, I had some viewers that asked about a mechanical unit that was on a heater that I installed for a high temp oven. So let's go through on a job site of a mechanical unit before we build the oven and the mechanical unit still opened up, and take a look at the guts of a mechanical unit. For those of you that didn't see the innards of a burner section, that's the burner tube. We've got all the cover plates off of it. Inside is a ceramic element.
How do I adjust these so I can get this in there?
That's a kale wool wrapper around the bulkhead. And you've got the blower section down here. Shaft goes all the way through. It's a dual inlet blower. The little black pipe on top is the airflow switch. It goes in and senses airflow inside the blower. And out here's where it discharges out into the rest of the oven. The rest of the oven that is not completed yet. But there's your fitting right here for that airflow switch, and that comes up to an Antunes airflow switch. There's where your shaft goes through for the belt drive. And these are interesting. They actually leave an air gap around the shaft, and this chamber is under negative pressure. So there's always a small amount of air coming in, which actually pulls outside ambient air in through this opening, which in turn air cools the shaft. It keeps the shaft cool and doesn't allow any heat to get to this bearing. So that's an interesting arrangement, that they leave an intentional air gap around the shaft. So that's pretty standard with high temperature burner boxes. All right, and there's the rest of it there, and there's your burner up on top that fires straight down into the unit. We're on the other side. We've got the same arrangement with the shaft, with the air gap, and we've got another airflow switch here. But what I want you to notice, on this one common shaft, we're driving two blowers. This one is a recirculation blower being driven off of that shaft. But if we come over here, there's another blower. Those two pipes are for the airflow switch. You can barely catch a glimpse of that blower, but that shaft is running the exhaust blower, and that's a duct internal to the system that goes up and discharges air out into the atmosphere through the roof. So that gets a duct through the roof. So off of one shaft, we're driving two separate blowers, which is a unique feature. So that's a direct fired mechanical unit, double blowers on a common shaft with a common drive motor. So now you get to see the innards of a mechanical unit on a high temp industrial oven. Next up, let's go over to the bench and look at some eBay stuff that I got, some repair stuff that I had done, and some flea market swap meet stuff that I'm resurrecting. So let's go over and visit the bench. Well, let's start with a little bit of flea market stuff. I was up in the Bay Area, and I met Tom Lipton at one of his favorite swap meets, and we rousted around there. And we chanced upon, he's got a good eye for this stuff. I was going to pass them all by. We chanced upon these, and these were outside caliper, inside caliper, and then a pair of dividers with inside measurement capabilities, and they were all like this, and you can barely see it. I kind of polished it off there. That is an LS Starrett, and as all of these, I didn't even know this one was a Starrett until I polished it up. But right there on that top one, you can just tip it so you can see it. That is a Starrett, and that's a very nice unit. That's been polished and gun-blued. And same with these. These had some bad pitting. These have been gun-blued and oiled and everything. But they had some bad pitting out on this area. It looked like they'd been sitting in water or something, so the pitting didn't all come out. I just ran a burnishing wheel over them, which is very similar to a compressed Scotch-Brite. For your little rotary file, you can get these arbors, or you can actually make them too. That's a tapered arbor with kind of a coarse, kind of a thread on it, backwards thread, so that when you're running this thing, it actually screws onto the mandrel. It's a mandrel or a spindle or whatever, but that's a burnishing wheel. And they can be formed to different shapes. There's a burnishing wheel that's been kind of cut away and made to go down in kind of a ball groove to polish the inside of a ball groove. And they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. There's a wide one. There's a little skinny one.
But that's what I use to polish the beams, to get all the rust off and to create a surface finish. And then you come back with 320 sandpaper, and then follow it up with a very light Scotch-Brite. I followed it up with a gray Scotch-Brite, and this is the finish I get after it's all cleaned up and down to bare raw metal. Then you put a gun blue on it, and I use Precision brand Tool Black. Follow the directions in the can. Go to precisionproducts.com to get your hands on some of this. This is pretty good stuff. Lasts a long time too. It's not, they don't give it away. It's not cheap. But when you can go from a tool that looks like this to a tool that looks like this in about 20 minutes, it's pretty much worth it. And taking these apart is pretty challenging. Trying to get this pin out and release this spring tension and get all that apart so you can get in there and polish all that stuff is challenging, but I worked my way through it. Never taken one apart before, but no big deal. And this little ball wasn't swaged on or anything. It's threaded, so it just simply unscrews, and I just put it back together with a drop of red Loctite after it was all clean. So, all right. But that's a way to bring a tool back from the grave. And it was cheap enough. I think I gave $3 for all three of these tools. This one still needs to be done, but I've got a couple hours into these two right now, but I've got very useful tools that won't rust anytime soon. That gun blue is really going to protect them. All right, that's enough of flea market, and as they call it up there, we call them swap meets down here. eBay. I think I've got a sickness, so I was going through eBay and looking at some indicators. And this is a pretty nice Mitsutoyo. That's a tenths indicator. And what's interesting about it, it is branded Mitsutoyo, but over here, if you look at it, it says Made in USA. I have never had a Made in USA Mitsutoyo before. They're all Japanese made, which I'm fine with. But I got this for my comparator stand, so I could do tenths measurements on my comparator stand. And it's a very nice action. Snaps back to where it, where it comes to rest over at 9 o'clock, and just a very nice action. Last calibrated in 2005. So, and it's got someone's initials AT on it, and it's definitely used. But gosh, look at the crystal on that thing. I'll tip it so it catches some light. But the crystal's just perfect on it. The face is nice and white, not yellowed or anything. So what a beautiful gauge. I was the only bidder. Picked it up for about $22. So I was very pleased to get that. Here's another interesting one. Now this is kind of vintage. This is an Inco, and Inco never actually made indicators, but they rebranded them. And if you'll notice, it says made in Japan down at the bottom. Now their early stuff was actually very nice. And what's interesting here, I've got my certificate and guarantee of inspection from Inco Manufacturing on Bloomingdale Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. No postage stamp necessary if mailed in within the United States. Postage will be paid by addressee. Return this card to Inco. I wonder what would happen if I just filled that out and sent it in. But that's all from Inco Manufacturing. So that was kind of a cool, uncompleted vintage warranty card that was enclosed in the box. And then let's take a look at the indicator. That's a Japanese-made, Inco rebranded dial indicator, 1-inch travel, and just as smooth as can be. It's got a real nice feel. And up at the, I guess that would be the 11 o'clock position is where they come to rest. It's still got the little plastic, actually these are metal. Yeah, those are metal. Go and no-go range finders for you there. The bezel still locks very nicely. A real nice smooth movement on that. And it's been mounted. You can see right there on the lug, I can see a shadow mark of a ring from a washer or something, where it's actually been mounted. But good Lord, this thing is just, it's got the hammer tone finish on the back. Just a nice little gauge. And I've got other Incos. What's interesting about this is one of my very first gauges that I ever got was a little Inco DTI. Let's see if we'll focus on that. Put a background on it. There, kind of focused on it. Okay, but this is a robust little gauge. Again, made in Japan. Again, rebranded by Inco. I've had this thing forever, and it's just a wonderful little DTI. So that's kind of a set now. I've got these two vintage Incos that were Japanese made. Anyways, no one has any respect for these things, but they work wonderfully. $17 on eBay. So I guess you could say I've got kind of a sickness that, you know, some men collect wristwatches, some men collect bottle caps or beer bottles. I collect gauges. I mean, I've got DTIs ranging from all sizes. Here's a cute little fella. That's a little Alina. Tiny little thing. And I'll show you that compared to a modern Michitoyo as for the size of the gauge. So if you ever need to get into any small spots, this little guy is pretty darn handy. Now it's got a switch on the side, and those are a little different because when it's switched up, it's capable of upward movement, but not downward movement. Then if you switch it down, it's capable of downward movement, but not upward movement. So you always have to be mindful of which way you're going to be indicating, and you have to flip that little switch there accordingly. Very nice little gauge, smooth action. Always enjoyed that. Little guy getting in some tight spots. When the dial gets in the way, when you got this big old fat dial and you can't get in somewhere. So pretty neat. And I've got others. I'm kind of a Michitoyo fan. This little Brown and Sharp has proved to be a good little gauge. That's a real fussy little guy. That measures in half-tenths. Which brings me to my next one. This little Alina, or also known as Compact, made in Switzerland. I bought this and another one in a tool lot on eBay. Now the other one that came in with it wasn't happy with the movement. It felt a little funny. Wasn't getting repeatable readings. Felt a little sticky. So I wanted to send it in. I started with Long Island Indicator Service. And I had a couple conversations with their technicians, and I told them I had an M31 Alina. And one of the technicians even said, "Have you ever seen the size of the of the jewels and the spindles and stuff inside of an M31?" I said, "No, I'm terrified to even take one apart. I can't see that small of stuff." He goes, "Well, I've seen them and I can't work on them. They're too small for me." So I was kind of stuck with it. I had this gauge that wasn't working right. And I was talking to Tom Lipton, and he said, "Hey, why don't you try my guy, see if he'll work on them." And so I contacted him, and he said, "Sure, send it over. I'll at least have a look at it. I don't know. I'm not going to guarantee I can fix it, but I'll send it over." And so I sent it over to him, and it's called MR Tool Repair Service. He asked me not to give out his name or his address, so I've got masking tape over those. But he can be contacted at mrtool2010@hotmail.com. And after I got it over there to him, he looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, that's no problem. It was a mainspring that had gotten kinked, and it was causing it the preload to not preload or something. But this is a little fussy tense gauge Alina, and just it's got 4 thousandths full scale movement from 0 to 2 thousandths. Back around to 0 gives you a total of 4 thousandths total movement. So your, the resolution on your tenths are pretty good, and you can see any slight variations. This little gauge will drive you to drink. Now again, it's got the little switch right here. When I flip the switch, it takes it from one scale and flips it all the way around to the other scale just in the blink of an eye. And it zips all the way back around here. I'll flip it again. Burp. And there it goes to the other side. So one's for the push, and one's for the pull, or whatever you want to call it. So one's for an upstroke and one's for a downstroke. But sweet little gauge, and I sure thank MR Tool Repair Service for doing something that Long Island Indicator declined to do. I completely recommend him. I've only used him once, but fast service, reasonable pricing, and got an old vintage tool back up and running for me. All right, check them out if you ever need any tool repair. He does. Let's see, what all does he do? Calipers, micrometers, bore gauges, indicators, and height gauges. On-site repair of optical comparators, hardness testers, and super micrometers. That's pretty super. All right, check him out. All right, so I got some pretty good buys. Some of the stuff was pretty cool. I really like that old Inco classic indicator. That was pretty cool, and the price was definitely right. Next up, we're going to go to and work on James comparator stands. They're sitting here, they're done. But let's go get started on those and get a grind on those, and let's see if we can get the top and bottom surfaces parallel. Hey guys, welcome to Bar Z. My name's Stan, and we've got a grinding project that came in. This comes to us from Mr. James Green, and he sent 2 comparator stands, and these are this one's a Starrett number 665. And it's in pretty nice shape. It's got a cool looking H cross section. And then and this one's in a really good shape. The paint's in nice shape. Still got the Starrett on the side. And he just wants it cleaned up. It's got a few dings in the corners. A little high spot there where it looks like it's been dropped or banged around on something. So he just wants it cleaned up. And no big deal. That's pretty easy grind work. But he also sent in this Brown and Sharp. And just look at that. Ugh. And it's got rounded corners and it doesn't look good at all. What I've done is the beam here, he had polished in here with a surface conditioning disc, like a little Scotch-Brite wheel. I bead blasted these edges, wiped them down with Oakite. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's an acid etch. It's spelled O-A-K-I-T-E, Oakite. Google it. Wiped it down with Oakite and sprayed a brownish gold hammer tone down in there, and I've let it cure for a few days, and then I scraped it off with a razor blade here where I'm going to be grinding, and on these top surfaces just to get the gummy off of it. I don't want to be grinding into that paint, but there's some pretty deep gouges here, so I'm going to zero up. I'm just going to use a comparator. This is another way to measure stuff. I'm going to zero up on this guy, and so you can use this knob here to zero up on your test subject. This is a 2-inch travel Mitutoyo, so it's pretty good for measuring after you've established a zero. So, we've got some low spots. We'll go over here to this corner. You can see it drops off pretty radically by about 5 thousandths in that corner. And we'll get over here in this corner. And so you're low there too, and it snaps right back up to 0. And then where those gouges and stuff were, you can see there, it takes a pretty hard nosedive there. So there's about 5 thousandths that needs to come out of this thing. There's some pretty good gouges there on the side. So, and this is an old Brown and Sharp. You can barely read it. Looks like a 730. But that Brown and Sharp logo is going to be going away. As soon as I start grinding, that thing's a goner. And what he said he wanted to do was go ahead and match them to the Starrett. And this might be interesting. And the Starrett might have to be reground too, just to clean it up. But in a strange turn of events, the Starrett is 10 thousandths lower. And it's still in pretty nice shape, aside from, you know, those couple of dings. So we'll try to take as little as possible off the Starrett, and this Brown and Sharp's going to take a lot of grinding. But we need to get 10 thousandths out of here to get them in the ballpark. Then we can grind the two of them as a pair. And we're gonna work on the big top and bottom surfaces before we mess with the rails and the ends or anything like that. So let's get these two stands equal to each other and get our grind on here with the Brown and Sharp and get that cleaned up. He said he wants to use them in pairs. He wants to be able to lay parts across both of them and have them both equal. That's why he wants them matched. So, and he's got the stands and everything for it over at his place. But let's get going on this, and we'll get back over on the bench. And after a couple thousandths material removal, you can kind of see here. Is that blowing the camera out? Not too bad. We got some really bad lows over here, just around the perimeter where this thing was cleaned with a surface conditioning disc. So we're going to be quite a bit lower. We've established a flat. We're flipped over on a good flat that we trust now, not just a hand lap stone ground thing. So now we can really start to parallel this up. If I don't want to chase that too much, but I'm going to go a little bit more. We've got an overall surface, but our edges are really falling off bad. So probably 4 or 5 more thousandths. And okay, I've gone about as far as I want to go. And I'll show you here. Wipe the sludge off of it. You can see where the cast iron kind of creates a sludge, not really the stuff we're used to seeing. And we still got corners rounded off. I'm not going to chase those. But out in the middle, we've got all nice flat surface. I suspect that my chuck needs to be reground, but we're going to go verify it now and throw a tenths gauge on, switch out from a thousandths to a tenths, and see how, see what our end-to-end variation is. If it's too far off, we're going to come back and regrind the chuck. One project always leads to another one. All right, let's get back over to the plate. Okay, we're back from the grinder and back from the sink, and we're cleaned and washed and blown dry. Cast iron was going to flash rust in the blink of an eye, so you got to work with it pretty quick. But there's our two grinds. There's one side. There's the other side. And let's just do we're going to use this to measure to see how low we got. Well, we got very low. Okay, so now we're 18 thousandths below. So we took 7, 8. Yeah, about 8 thousandths per side we took out of there. So we're about 19 thousandths less than when we started. And now at this point our Starrett is going to be sitting high. So our Starrett's proud. Okay, so enough horseshoes and hand grenades. Let's move it over to the real nitty gritty and change our gauge here. There's a little Mitsutoyo tenths gauge. Hopefully it doesn't completely blow out the camera. If I put it there, yeah, you can see that. I just got that. I thought it was nice and big and maybe it would camera a little better. Okay. I don't feel any stickies in there or anything. If you crank down on this little clamp too tight, it'll crunch that spindle sometimes. And it'll cause the indicator to bind up, but that actually feels really good. All right, let's get us down in the ballpark here. I'm trying to do this without putting my arm in front of the camera, but that's not going to happen. There we go, we're tight. And we can adjust here. And now we can see the slightest of variations. They were falling off. Okay, so we're good there. So we're going to go from one end, which I'm showing a 1/10. We're calling this negative, so a 1/10 on the low side. I'm going to slide it back this way. And she's dropping. And then coming back up. So we've got a little sway back in it. It's about a 1/10 low in the center. Let's check this other beam. All right, there's your low, your 1/10 low. High. Goes from low and pretty much stays there. A little rocking action going on there. Let's flip this over. See how the other side feels. I wipe this down with my hand once. Make sure we're not teeter-tottering on a little piece of grit or something. That feels pretty good. I'll put this back on here. Okay, that feels better. Yeah, it's coming up a lot. And it's staying up. I'm thinking we might want to do this over on the surface plate and compare our measurements. I'm gonna go measure my. Also, I'm gonna go measure my chuck. I'm not. When you find an error, and chasing the source of error is something that always needs to be done. Whether you need to determine whether it's your plate, which I don't think it is. I don't think it's this plate, but I'm gonna do the same test over on the other plate and check it all the way around, see if I get that same variation. Then I'm gonna go check the mag on my grinder. That's something that hasn't been done in quite a long time, is resurfacing the mag. So one project can begat another one. So that's thus the shop ADHD. You run around doing this and go, oh, I forgot to do the chuck, and so you got to go do the chuck before you can do this. And oh, I need a special wheel for that. Okay. So one project begats another one. So let's take this over to the main plate, check it there. And then we're going to evaluate it there. If I'm getting the same numbers, then we're going to go over to the grinder and look at the mag. Okay, we're over on the plate, and we thought we'd try it over here to get another. Always measure stuff as many different ways as you can. And let's see if we got a rock, and we still got a rock. And I still don't like what I see moving across. So we're going to turn our attention to the mag over on the surface grinder. So I really hate that. All right. So let's go measure that before we grind it. It's a pain because we got to pull the fence off to grind the chuck, but I think my chuck on the grinder is ready for a regrind. And this is just like maintenance kind of stuff that needs to happen every once in a while. So let's go over there and evaluate that.
Okay, well, things aren't going so good. And it looks like we need a chuck regrind. Let's go take our newly refurbished Alina and go look at the chuck after we ground it and see, see how it turned out.
Okay, so I just finished grinding up the magnetic plate, and my wheel of choice was the Norton 32A series. This was a 60K, which is a very one of the harder wheels. And the reason I chose that was so that as I traverse across the plate, I wouldn't get any wheel degradation, and it would help maintain my accuracy coming across. And it gives me a chance to try out my new little Alina gauge. I've got it at the spindle center, and I'm gonna just kind of move it around here and remove some stiction, do a little down feed, and try to get us on a good 0 there. The plate is temperature stable. I ground it with the magnet on. I currently have it off right now, just to measure it, and I'll measure it maybe again, magnet on, see if there's any difference. I don't think there will be. I just don't want to send any magnetic fields into this little Alina. I just had it repaired, and I really don't want to damage it by turning on the magnet. That's the reason I've got it off now, but I did grind the plate magnet on. And I don't think this is considered an anti-magnetic gauge. It's an older model, so it's got a lot of steel, aluminum, brass, whatever in there. All right, it's a little jumpy. It's just reading the scallops. As you can see, it's got one heck of a resolution. I'm gonna get some light over here. Wow, look at me moving the light. I'm flexing the tower, and you can even see that on the gauge. Good Lord. All right, I'm not touching anything. Hoping you can see that gauge. And I'm just gonna traverse left, right, which we pretty much expected, you know. But here's where the kicker is. I want to make sure that we're running even, you know, front to back. So let's get us here and move us maybe to the center. Take about the first half of the plate. And it's dropping a little bit. I've lost about a half a tenth, and that resolution is nice. You can see a half a tenth on there. And we'll just traverse, or we'll run it over to the left. There, I've lost a half, or I've lost a tenth. It's coming up just a little bit, back up to 0. So we lost a little bit mid plate. Let's go out to the front, and she's still dropping off. And I think this can probably be attributed to the fact that my machine needs to be scraped. All right, I've lost, where are we at? There we go. Let's get the, yeah, I've lost about almost 2/10, you know. Love that resolution on that gauge. Doesn't like to be moved fast. It likes to be moved slowly. All right, we're coming up on a 0 there. So we got a low here in the center. Just drove over a speed bump there. Am I dirty over here? There. Two-tenths low. Midpoint, about 1.5 increments. Back over here, about 1/2 increment. We're going to run back to our starting point, make sure we go back to 0. It's going to quantify all our measurements. I don't really see it on the rise like it was before. We'll remove the friction in that gauge there, also known as stiction, also known as hysteresis. All right, so I'm showing a 1/10 low, so something slipped somewhere. Temperature changed. Butterfly farted a 1/4 mile away from here. So I would say our overall dimension out in front isn't as bad as we think it is. It could even be this light warming things up. There's a light shining right on that gauge, so that could be affected too. So as soon as we start heading out front, I'm still seeing a drop, but I don't think it's as drastic as we thought it was to begin with, because we started off at a 1/10 below, and now we're just barely coming up on 2/10. So I don't think our total error is 2/10. Our total error is about a 1/10. So I'm pretty happy there. There's 2/10 there, but our initial was just 1/10. All right, so I'm gonna call that plate good. I'm gonna put the fence back on it and get back to Mr. Green's project. Just wanted to play with my new gauge. All right, so my chuck's straight again. Now I can get back to doing James' project. One project always somehow branches off and gets another one going. Thus the shop ADHD. It happens everywhere you go. One project begets another one. So let's get back to James' project. We got our chuck fixed. We found the source of our error, and we've been meaning to do that for a long time. So that grinder was due for a little bit of maintenance, and we gave it to it. Let's get back to James' comparator stands. Okay, so here's a Starrett with a Brown and Sharp backup. I'm just going to show them all the way through and try to watch that gauge all at the same time. All right, we snapped up to 0. See how I'm steering this thing. Got a good 0 there, all the way across. Coming up on the Brown and Sharp, you'll probably see a little jump when it switches over. There's your jump. And let's shove the Brown and Sharp through. All right, so the whole schmear is it's pretty darn good. It's within a tenth all the way across. All right, so there's your two gauges. All right, so we got the tops done. Let's move on to the side rails. We're going to get those side rails trued up in relationship to the top and bottom surface. Now that we're happy that both of them are parallel, equal to each other in height, we've got two parallel surfaces. And on this one, we want to grind these little side rails and clean them up. And you know, if we set it down here, you can probably hear that. It's rocking. Doesn't sound good. This side, pretty good. But if we just, I get a little bit, probably hear that. Now, if we just assume that those are square, hey, there's another country heard from. There goes my air compressor. Yeah, let me go turn that thing off. All right, that's enough of that noisemaker. You know, we still got a little bit of rock here, and we're just making an assumption that this is square. So, you know, but we want these to be square that this way and this way both. We're just going to use a toolmaker's vise, and that way we know we're square in one direction, and then we'll indicate on these rails and get a good average, so we're not removing a whole gob of material. So we'll just get my old standby here. It's probably not going to be big enough. Let me move this rod over to here. I think that's where we want it there. Yeah, it's probably going to work. Now we clamp it in here. We've got we know we're going to, no matter what, we're going to pull this up squarely because we've got two parallel surfaces here. So no problems there. The only thing we want to kind of worry about is our side to side this way. So I'm just going to kind of just barely tighten it, and then we're going to indicate it and try to find us an average over the two. Let's go around once here. Okay. The 0 is up there. And it's a big raggedy surface, but we can still get a pretty good average and see what's going on there. And that's actually pretty darn good right there. I'm going to go ahead and take this down. And I've got no more than a half thou variation across there. I mean, we're jumping a lot, and it's up and down and in and out and everything, just because it's such a rough surface. All right, let me move over here. This is really high over here, but still very parallel. Okay. So we're happy there. We're gonna call that a good average and nice and flat across this way. And we're gonna get this grind done. Then we can simply flip and grind the other two rails. So no problems. Our vise is tight. We're ready to grind. Well, we got it out of the toolmaker's vise, and we got it out here. There's your new rails. It just got ground there and there, and now I softened all these edges. I went over it with a diamond card and went around and softened all these edges up because they were just like a little razor. And it made a clean break for the paint, and you see where the paint just stops cleanly right there. So it's a good looking finish there. And now we've got a flat spot for it to sit on. No rock. So now we don't even need the toolmaker's vise anymore. We can plop this right down on the magnet and do this other side. Done deal. And I don't know why anyone would ever want to use one of these on their sides with the rod hanging out here with the gauge on it and all that. But if they want to, they want to. Or if they want to indicate off of it, they can indicate off of it or whatever. They'll have a couple of parallel sides. And he did ask me to do the ends too, so I'm going to go ahead and square up these ends. Maybe he's going to do some kind of a comparator type thing on it or something. But next up is just do these last two rails, and then we have to stand the whole Marianne up and do these tops and square them up because they're certainly not even close to sitting right. And we'll have to square it two different ways, and I've got a way to do that too that I'll show you. All right, so let's go finish those rails, and these things are kind of on the home stretch. All right, it's not going to be anything too earth-shattering here. We're just going to plop this guy down, and I'm about 99% sure that we're not going to have any trouble with the magnet grabbing that. Oh no, that's solid. Even though they're two little skinny rails, they're bridging across a lot of different magnet sectors there. So we'll just do a touch off and grind this side, and we've got four sides square. All we need is 5 and 6, and this thing will be done. Nice, cool. Figure out how we're going to hold them vertically now. This should be pretty easy. Okay, right? Back at the surface plate, and we've got our brown and sharp here. Both side rails are done. We know they're square. We're happy with the side rails. So we've got four sides. All we got left's the ends, and they're just ugly. They're bubbled and bowed and everything else. So we want to be able to stand this up and square it up two different ways. How do you do that? Well, you could stick it in the vise, just the standard way like this. And we could try to do a square thing over here on the side. And that's thinking conventionally and not being much of a conventional guy. Why don't we just take the whole vise, roll it on its side, take this guy, bring it in like that, and push it down into the bed firmly, tighten it, and now we're square on this plane and this plane. And now we can grind our top just with the vise sucked down to the mag, done deal. So that's how we're gonna grind this top and square it up. Make sure I'm seated firmly into the bed of the vise. And tight. There we go, ready to grind.
Oh, so Stan's grinder the spindle doesn't go up high enough to hold the comparator stands vertically. Looks like we're gonna have to side wheel them. How unfortunate is that? But let's go side wheel those things and at least get them cleaned up.
Okay, so here's this, the setup. It turns out that when we stood everything up, we couldn't get the height out of the machine. The spindle wouldn't go high enough to make the grind. So we're forced to side wheel it. Fence installed, ground square, a parallel that I trust, and then the vise butted into the parallel. Now we're gonna just come in here and drop our part in. We know it's square this way. We know it's square this way because it's laying down on the bed of the vise. And then we can side wheel it. It's not the most beautiful grind in the world. You get kind of a crosshatch swirl pattern, as you can see there, but it is 100% functional and it is very square. Like I say, not the most beautiful thing in the world, but that's going to have to be the way it's going to work. The spindle simply doesn't go high enough. So we got one more side to do on this one, and then 2 sides of the sterret finished. Okay, so we're back, and we've got, after we stopped, worked on the machine, so we quit grinding door stops. We finally got James' stuff done, and I'm going to show you the wheel that I used. That's a Norton, that's a 32A series, but it is a 60K. That's a K hardness. It's a very hard wheel. If you're concerned about wheel degradation, always go with a hard wheel. This is probably a little finer than I should have used, but I got a pretty nice finish on both the chuck and on these soft cast iron stands. So I was able to use the same wheel for refacing my chuck and for doing the soft gray iron here. So hard wheel, soft materials, flood it with coolant really hard, just to keep the junk out of the wheel. It's like a powder. You're not really getting the shavings like you're used to seeing. It's cast iron, so you know, if you were machining it, it would be very dusty, the gray iron. So grinding it's much the same, and you need to flood that stuff out of the way, flood the wheel hard. The centrifugal force will push all the stuff out of the wheel and keep your wheel clean. We weren't necessarily using coolant for the cooling properties, we just wanted the cleansing properties. All right, so that was my wheel of choice for both the chuck and for the actual job. All in all, this took a day and a half, so I got, I got about 3/4 of a day into working on the machine, and another little bit working on James' stuff. So it was long overdue, it needed it, so we gave it what it needed. All right, guys, thanks for watching. All right, well, we got them finished. They're here, side wheeled, all surfaces ground. James, these are coming back to you. I'm gonna get them wrapped up and out in the mail to you. I sure appreciate you guys tuning in to the grind number 36. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.